is about the main advances in my assessment of agroecology in the last 20 years and what has it missed. I think the two big advances of agroecology is first that it has established itself as a paradigm that no one can be blind to. It made its way to the declaration of Rio +20. It is the heart of the International Assessment of Agricultural Science, Technology and Knowledge for Development, a global assessment created 10 years after the Earth Summit, which was held in Johannesburg, because agriculture was in deep crisis. There was a drought in southern Africa, and two things were clear. The US was trying to push GMO corn on on the African countries, and they were saying no. And the second thing was, wherever there were agroecological practices, the farms had survived the drought, both because of the organic matter in the soil and the trees, and therefore the study was asked to be undertaken. 400 scientists working 6 years. And the conclusion is neither the Green Revolution as the chemical agriculture driven by corporations, nor the ecological farming, and nor the GMOs are a food security solution. Only agroecology is, only ecological agriculture is. That's a huge success. And it isn't because suddenly those who promote agroecology were in powerful positions all over the world. It's more the power of the idea. It's more the exposure of the absence of knowledge in industrial farming. I am deeply convinced that industrial agriculture is not a scientific system. It's based on not knowing anything. The only knowledge in it is how to make violent inputs, how to torture an organism by shooting genes to make GMOs, how to spray poisons on agroecosystems. When you're violent, you don't have to have knowledge. When you keep something alive, that's when you have knowledge. And agroecology has filled a vacuum of knowledge. The second very, very important contribution it has made is I'm old enough to have had to constantly tell people, it doesn't matter what kind of ecological agriculture you do. We are not each other's worst enemies. Don't spend your energies fighting between the permaculturist and the biodynamic and the organic and the natural, and it goes on and on and on. And there's one guru creates one name, and then all the followers go after that name. We don't have to be a cult. The beautiful thing about agroecology is it transcended the cults and gave a belonging to a deeply ecological approach with a deep knowing that goes with farming. What are the things that still need to be done? I think the two big pieces of work that will make agroecology the food movement. First is to link it to food. It's too much restricted to methods of production on the farm. It needs to also have an ecology of distribution, because no system is complete if we don't bring in those who eat. And the best way to bring in those who eat is the health link. And this is very, very important, because this is what links the city to the countryside. This is what moves the power that the city has and people in cities have to become part of the transition. And once we bring health in a serious way into ecological agriculture, then we unleash a people's movement that is so strong and so broad-based that it can never ever be shut down. And if you really look at it, who's fighting GMOs? It's people concerned about GM food. You know, the US has been eating GM food and now they're waking up to it and wanting labeling. Because mothers are finding that the children are permanently sick and they want to be able to avoid GM foods. On 4th of July, this was very beautiful, women from US asked me to do a YouTube for them. They called it Moms Across America, and they marched on Independence Day, wherever they were, for food freedom. Mothers said, we don't know what we are feeding our kids and we should know. And we want that choice. So once we bring in that health aspect, the movement becomes much broader. Which connects me to the second question, which is how do you make real the local food production? What links the producers to those who eat, which is how local food systems get built? The fact of nutrition and health. Because if you don't care about your health, you'll eat any commodity. But if you care about your health, you will seek healthy food. Then you will seek food that was cultivated in healthy ways, and only ecological agriculture gives you healthy food. But the second thing for the local food systems is something that's already being tried in Brazil, something I've been talking about increasingly in India. You must have been hearing the news about 2 weeks ago where 23 children died because of pesticide in the midday meal scheme at lunchtime in a school. And I immediately said, this wouldn't happen if there were gardens in the school, if there were community farms around the school. We have been, since the Green Revolution, we've been made to believe there have to be special places where food is grown. The Green Revolution said Punjab in India, globalization said the American Midwest. Now the American Midwest is ruined, either with drought or with a water decline or with the soils being eroded or superweeds taking over. We can't depend on it. So we have to change our mind to realize that the earth is fertile everywhere. And she is waiting to give us abundance. If only we turn every piece of earth into a source of nutrition and food. And the minute we go out of thinking of it in terms of commodity production and these large-scale monocultures, and we start thinking in terms of gardens, growing nutritious crops, good vegetables, tiny patches, can grow so much vegetable. But you know, when we do school programs with gardens, and when I ask the children, I said, what did you learn from the garden? 2 things they say. One, we didn't realize that the tiny seed could give us more than 1,000 tomatoes. You know, they experienced that miracle of life. And the second thing they said is, and the fact that from that tomato, we could save a seed and plant it again. Because when you have a commodity relationship to food, it's something you buy off the shelf. But when you have a cultivation relationship to food, you realize the value of renewable seed, farmer's seed, open pollinated seed. You know the difference between non-renewable seed and renewable seed. You start knowing the difference between life-giving food and life-denying food. And all kinds of education come with it. So, there's someone prompting me to remind us that living seed gives seed. You know, the word seed in Hindi, in Sanskrit is bija. Ja is life, B is that in which life arises on its own forever. It doesn't need anyone's help. But Monsanto wants all of the seeds to wait for it, to have permission. And patents for them weren't enough, so then they created Terminator technology to deliberately make seeds sterile. And it's only when you buy their chemicals that it'll give a crop. To me, the worst crime would be to turn the source of life into a dead seed. And we were successful by making this illegal through the Convention on Biological Diversity, but they are their own masters. They don't tell any governments what they are using for breeding. They don't tell any government whether the male sterile line they're using for hybrids is based on Terminator technology. Nobody really knows. I know this much, that wherever the seed corporations have gotten in India, there is such large-scale failure of crops. There's no seeding. In the corn, in the pulses, the plant grows and there's no seed. When seed is what the crop should give you, so that you can have permanent food security. I think the biggest challenge that we have is this. At this point, agribusiness is staying afloat with our money. Not with efficiency, but through subsidies. And I've just done a calculation for India because they're trying to propose a new food security bill, which is really for agribusiness. And they're going to end buying from farmers, which is the system so far in India, where the government buys from farmers and then distributes. They want to abandon the farmers, buy from the corporations, and give more subsidies to the corporations. If they get away with the feeding programs for the vulnerable, it's 1 trillion rupees market, captive market, on the basis of our tax money. That's where they like to go. Now, the kind of projects in Brazil which need to grow and become bigger, where the tax money is transformed and redirected to local production, so that the local hospital gets local organic food, local schools are fed local organic food, the poor are fed local organic food, and this very false idea that, and in terms of agroecology, we have a wonderful word to describe a system of production. But so far, by the time things travel, the only word so far is organic. You can't really say agroecological product. Nobody understands it. There is this myth being developed that organic is for the rich and GMOs and chemicals are the food for the poor. Why is this a myth? Because ecological is actually lower cost production because you don't buy any inputs. So on a real economy, it is the cheaper option. But on the false economy of subsidies, where the rich countries are giving $400 billion a year, more than $1 billion a day, to their corporations. In India, we are giving ₹1 trillion just as subsidy for the nitrogen fertilizers, and it's bigger than our defense budget. Now, can you imagine if all this public money was redirected to build ecological farms and local systems? There's no lack of money, it's just going to the wrong place. And I think we will need, in the agroecology movement, a discussion about how public money is spent. Because in a democracy, the public should decide how the public's money is spent, not the corporations. And we will have to stop subsidizing the corporations, which is the only way they're still there in the market. There's a question I don't understand at all. It is how important is spirituality, I think it means, in the Green Revolution. Now, if you're talking about the Green Revolution as the pseudo name for chemical agriculture, a pretend religiosity was there. Norman Borlaug called his seeds miracle seeds. Nothing less. Miracle seeds. And he called the 12 people he trained his 12 wheat apostles to spread these miracle seeds. I think he had a confusion. He thought he was Jesus Christ. And the scientific revolution had nothing, the Green Revolution had nothing scientific about it. It was this push on the basis of these words like apostles and religion and miracle. But if you're talking about the Green Revolution as the ecological revolution, then ecological revolution is about two things. An awareness that we are connected to the world. We are part of the web of life. And an awareness through that in that oneness with life, we have a common inner being, which is beyond us to comprehend. You can use any word for it, but recognition of interconnectedness is the foundations of ecology. Agroecology is realizing the connection between the soil and the trees and the animals and the farmers. Ecology is realizing the connections that make the web of life, of which we are a part. But recognizing that we are not just this outside skin, there's something deeper in us, in my view is vital for another reason. And that simple reason is, and a lot of people ask me this, you take on Monsanto so directly, aren't you scared of them? I said, I'm not scared of them. I sued them in '98 and I used to get threatening calls. Every half hour I used to get threats that I'd better stop and not file that case, otherwise the consequences would be very serious. All I did was make 20 copies of the case and told all my friends, I said, if I don't turn up in court, please submit this. So you have to be cautious. That's why we don't have a centralized seed bank in Vandana. We have created 110 places where farmers have their seed. So if they destroy one, we still have the others. But most important, what can they do to you at the end of it? They can bump you off, isn't it? That's about the highest they can achieve. Bump you off. And if you're not afraid of that because you're in transition, what's the problem? And I feel very satisfied that there are generations. The reason I'm so happy, I was anyway going to be happy coming to Brazil. That is why I dressed up for you. But I'm very, very happy because it is truly the case when one talks about doing the right thing, progressive politics, bringing change, very often it's just our age in the room. But there's so many of you who are very young. And when we see your young faces, I know this revolution is unstoppable. All strength to you.
Nem tem como agradecer, né, gente? As palmas já estão